Earlier today, Sensor Tower updated their website, including the revenue for Wuthering Waves, since the numbers were made official. And it is worth noting here that these numbers are specifically pertaining to mobile. A lot of people have taken to social media, and more specifically Reddit, to doom post the game to say, oh my god, Wuthering Waves only made X amount of money. Clearly it's a dead game because it didn't match Genshin Impact. And let me just preface this entire thing by stating yes, Wuthering Waves did not surpass Genshin Impact's week 1 revenue. But it didn't need to. You don't need to be Genshin Impact to be a success. I've been stating since the game released, since before the game released, this was not going to compete directly with Genshin Impact. It couldn't. I think both Genshin and Wuthering Waves are very different kinds of games. They appeal to very different audiences and an entirely different demographic to one another. I think they're both very good, very fun games. And while I think both games can technically coexist with one another, there isn't a single game that is going to release that will dethrone Genshin unless it's another Hoyo game. And at the same time, Honkai Star Rail has, for at least half the year, actually managed to gross more than Genshin Impact. So if we think about it, the game that dethroned Genshin was the turn-based Honkai Star Rail. But this video is about Wuthering Waves and the interesting narrative that people are creating online, specifically pertaining to the failure that Wuthering Waves has become. And I will openly admit, Kudo have fumbled. They have made numerous mistakes. Some of them are pretty damn critical, but this is nothing that they can't recover from. If Tower of Fantasy can recover from theft, plagiarism, severe exploits, hacks, abuse, then Wuthering Waves can recover from what they have been embroiled in thus far. But let's talk numbers specifically. Reports put Wuthering Waves, again, the mobile revenue for Wuthering Waves, China at $13.8 million, global at $11 million. This is rounded up to $25 million over the course of 8 days. For reference here, Tower of Fantasy earned $34 million within its first 14 days. Genshin Impact accumulated $60 million within its first 7 days. For the sake of clarity here, and so I don't spread misinformation, I do want to point out that after further investigating over on Reddit, it seems like Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail were underreported. Genshin Impact seems to have, using a 1.75 multiplier, made over $100 million in its first week and over $400 million over the course of its first month. I'm not sure entirely how all of this is tallied though, but I do nevertheless feel like it is worth noting. As I'm not trying to hide anything, I'm not trying to obscure anything, I'm not trying to paint this false narrative of any game here. Honkai Star Rail managed to amass $40 million within its first 7 days. Wuthering Waves has thus far accumulated revenue similar to Tower Fantasy, potentially higher, potentially lower. It's not possible to really accurately gauge given we're comparing 14 days to 8 days. But yes, 25 million is still significantly under Genshin's 60 million. Genshin Impact, of course, went on to gross $245 million over the course of its first month. Honkai Star Rail went on to garner $130 million in its first month. This is almost half of what Genshin made. Yet even with this in mind, it currently continues to make what is arguably a bare minimum of the equivalent of Genshin Impact, and some months double what Genshin makes. Which goes to show, even if you potentially make half of what Genshin Impact made, does not immediately and inherently make you a failure, especially given the fact that you can continue to grow and expand over time. This was just pertaining to mobile revenue. If we include PC revenue, it's a very different story. As I'm sure you're no doubt aware if you've been keeping up to date with the drama that's been going on, a lot of players were having issues with mobile functionality. They couldn't log into the game on mobile, they couldn't play the game on mobile, they couldn't purchase via mobile. Genshin Impact's revenue is roughly split similarly between PC and mobile. Tower Fantasy, however, has significantly more sales and earns significantly more revenue through PC. Tower Fantasy players believe that the game pretty much sucks via mobile, and I don't disagree. I also think that any action game, Punishing Grey Raven, Honkai Impact, Wuthering Waves, Tower Fantasy, they all suck on mobile. I think they all play significantly better on PC. my thumbs are too big and cover too much of the screen to accurately play on mobile and to enjoy it. Tower Fantasy reportedly makes roughly anywhere between $300,000 to $600,000 per month globally, and it makes roughly $800,000 within China. So let's just round this up here and say Tower Fantasy makes a minimum of $1.2 million per month, yet according to Perfect World Games financial report, the game makes roughly $5 million on average, meaning almost $4 million comes from PC alone. PC, of course, going unreported from Sensor Tower. With this in mind, if Tower Fantasy makes 4 times more money on PC, and most people that were playing Wuthering Waves play via PC, because not only does it run better, not only can you actually get in game and play it, and not only is it just a better, more enjoyable experience, then we could potentially multiply the revenue to ultimately end up with a much higher number. So if Genshin Impact is making 50 million on mobile, then it's making roughly 50 million on PC, totaling about $100 million. Honkai Star Rail is split fairly equally as well, but Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based game and definitely plays better on mobile than games like Genshin or Tower Fantasy or Wuthering Waves do. If we apply the Genshin multiplier and we look at Wuthering Waves 25 million, that means that in its first 8 days, it has made a bare minimum of $50 million. That is a significant accomplishment and achievement. But if we apply Tower Fantasy's multiplier, which is potentially a 4 times multiplier, and we multiply that 25 million by 4 times, we're looking at $100 million, which means Wuthering Waves in its first 8 days made 125 million. Now, that is being generous here. I'm not saying definitively that the game made 125 million. I'm saying we can use anywhere between a 1 to 4 times multiplier based off of Tower Fantasy, based off of Genshin Impact. It's worth noting that Wuthering Waves gave out multiple guaranteed 5-star characters, so people were required to pretty much spend very little outside of potentially upgrading their characters by getting dupes. Gion's banner, a male, a husbando, was available rather than Yinlin, the big booba waifu, which meant that less people were going to spend in its first 2 weeks, which also potentially means that more people are going to spend over the course of week 3 through week 4. Typically, spenders spend the most money during the first week or 2 of a game's launch. But in this instance, that might not be the case. A lot of mobile players were unable to actually get in game when they wanted to, and the future banner character is much more anticipated than the current one. Do I think this is going to ultimately make $245 million in its first month like Genshin Impact? No, I don't. But I do think it definitely has the potential to make a bare minimum of 100 million. It has potentially already made over $100 million. Genshin Impact this month made a grand total of $53 million. Honkai Star Rail this month made a grand total of $87 million. Wuthering Waves has already made $25 million to surpass Genshin in the next 22 days of its life. It just needs to make slightly more than it has already made. And I have no doubt that is going to happen. Genshin Impact this month, across mobile and PC, made roughly 120 million. Wuthering Waves, in 8 days, has made a minimum of 50 million and a potential 120 million plus. This is subject to decrease by a significant margin over the course of the next few months, and the next few months are actually going to be the deciding factor on whether the game is ultimately a success or not. But right now, Wuthering Waves has no doubt secretly surpassed not only Tower Fantasy, but also Genshin Impact. I don't know if it successfully surpassed Honkai Star Rail, because totaling Honkai Star Rail's PC and mobile revenue, we're looking at about 150 million or more. But Genshin Impact, yeah, people are claiming Wuthering Waves is dead. They're claiming it's been a catastrophic failure. It's a disaster. I mean, yeah, they've run into a lot of issues. Yeah, they might never recover from all of them. I genuinely hope they do. I've been playing Wuthering Waves every single day and thoroughly enjoying myself. But there is no denying, no contesting, regardless of whether you use a 1 times multiplier or a 4 times like Tower Fantasy, that this game has been a monumental success. And people saying the game is a failure do not understand this. Now, I genuinely look forward to next month's revenue so I can see how much Yinlin's banner made, But other than that, if this is of no interest to you, absolutely no problem. I got you covered with 2 different videos on the screen right now that might be more up your alley.